Hello and welcome to this RTS Futures panel with Gareth Edwards. As any comedian will tell you, the key to success is not only a great sense of humour, obviously, but also a brilliant producer. Gareth is certainly one of the best. He helped to launch the careers of Ben Miller and Peter Serafinovich. He helped develop the first series of Goodness Gracious Me, and he worked on the first series of Space, which is one of my top 3 all-time comedies. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. He's also the series producer behind the return of Mitchell and Webb to sketch comedy after 15 years. Mitchell and Webb Are Not Helping recently launched on Channel 4, produced by that Mitchell and Webb company in association with Big Talk Studios. Nobody knows better than Gareth how comedy works, so I'm delighted to speak to him today to hear all about his background, how he broke into TV, how he met David Mitchell and Robert Webb and fostered an amazing working relationship with them for 2 decades, and how he created the new series, which is available to stream on Channel 4. Towards the end of the session, Gareth is going to be joined by cast members Stevie Martin and Krystal Evans. But in the meantime, we're just going to have a chat, the two of us. Gareth, really looking forward to hearing how you got to where you are today. So welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start at the very beginning, shall we? It's a very good place to start. Did you always dream of getting into TV, or was it more about theatre and radio for you in the early days? Tell me a little about your influences early on.
Right. Well, I think in a way I was a little bit obtuse and didn't really sort of examine my own likes and dislikes while I was starting to think what I ought to do in my life. So I remember putting on a sketch at school when I was about 12, and I wrote it and got my friends to put it on, and we did it in front of the class, and I just that seemed to me like a really fun thing to do, and I carried on doing things like that on and off throughout school, and did a huge amount of acting at university, and loved watching comedy on television, and loved going to see stand up, but it never really occurred to me that that might in some way be a job.
Mhm.
So I tried, the first time I tried to get into TV, I thought, oh, I probably ought to go and make serious arts documentaries, because I was doing an arts degree, and I thought, well, okay, so I wrote lots of letters to things like the South Bank show and the um, what was it called? Arena, I think. There was a time when there were quite a lot of arts programs on television, and but I had this moment where I suddenly realized, if I was going to go and be interviewed by these people, I ought to watch some of the programs. And so I sat down and tried to watch lots of South Bank shows and lots of earnest programs talking about books. And I was a bit bored, to be honest. And what I actually really liked, I thought, oh, this is a bit tedious. Let's just watch a comedy to try and lighten the mood. And I liked watching the comedies, and I didn't like watching the earnest arts programs. And I suddenly thought, oh, hang on. Why don't I make the programs that I actually like watching?
Yeah.
And it was about that time that this ad appeared in the paper for a trainee radio light entertainment producers. And it was as if it had this little halo around it, and a choir of angels going, here is the job you want to do. And suddenly my levels of motivation to try and get that particular job really kicked in. And I found I was obsessively listening to and watching programs I was actually enjoying to try and get work. And sort of almost went about trying to get that radio light entertainment job like a sort of serious military campaign, writing letters to the people who produced the shows I liked, and writing my own sort of reviews of all the different radio shows that were on. And uh, yeah, it suddenly everything fell into place. And and also I've got to say, I was incredibly lucky that this job appeared at exactly the moment when I was trying to look for a sensible job.
That's a really great piece of advice. Actually, people talk about writing about what you know, but it's also leaning into your passions is
Yeah,
obviously
I
really
think
important. And
I think
comedy
it's
was a passion
crucial.
for you.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's got to be something that you really care about, and also, I sometimes I look back on the young me that was doing sort of job applications and went to the I got an interview with the BBC, and they asked me about various different BBC programs that I'd listened to, and I had listened to all of them. But I remember, I'd be very enthusiastic about this show or that show, and then they said, "And what do you think about Film on Two or whatever?" It was a radio program where they were reviewing films, and I think I sat there in the interview and I said, "Well, if I'm honest, I think the idea of reviewing films on the radio is a bit silly because it's such a visual medium." I thought, what, looking back on it, I thought, what on earth possessed me to dismiss out of hand this show that they'd obviously put a lot of time and trouble into making. But sometimes I think you've got to be honest, and if something isn't up your street as well, don't pretend that you love it. Just go, that one's not really for me, or it's great that it exists, but I don't really watch it. There's no point bluffing. People will see through that in a minute. But if
You said you sent lots of letters and you did lots of reviews. Was it quite a slog then at
Yeah,
first?
it was
A lot
actually.
to do.
And I think I was sort of blissfully ignorant of um how many people might be applying for that role as well. And so I just sort of said, "Hello, I liked your program and I'd love to come and spend a day watching how you do it. Is that all right?" And it didn't occur to me that lots and lots of other people would be doing that as well. Uh, and actually, people are quite receptive if you do approach them out of the blue, but with a knowledge of what they've been doing. If you go, "Well, I've never," if you're just applying sort of slightly randomly to go and follow someone who's made a program you don't like, they they won't be very receptive. But if you're obviously a fan, people generally like meeting fans, and even if they can't have you follow them for a day, they'll write you a nice letter back. I remember I wrote to the producers of Drop the Dead Donkey, which I enjoyed, and they wrote ever such a nice letter back saying, "No, you can't come and watch us rehearse, but good luck." And it's still, it was a contact. It was nice. It was, but a friend of mine often says in those situations, it's never that people don't want to hear from you. It's just that they're busy.
Yes.
So don't hold back from reaching out to people, and don't be offended if they don't reply.
We'll be talking about commissioning later on in this session and how people can get their pitches onto the radio or onto the television. But it occurs to me just now that talking about writing to all of these people, research is also important. You don't want to be writing to somebody knowing nothing about their program or
Yeah.
nothing about their production company. It's important to have that knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually, although in many ways it's much harder to get a foothold in the industry these days, there are some things that are a lot easier. So, you've got iPlayer, there's always a way of finding out what a company has made and watching it. And so there's really no excuse for reaching out without really having researched it properly.
So tell me about this first job then in the radio.
Oh, it was amazing. It was, I think there were 8 of us who started at the same time, which was unusual. I think they'd had a lot of staff move on to other things simultaneously. And so we started as a sort of cohort of trainee light entertainment producers, and they had an actual proper training program laid out for us which was probably about a month altogether. So they taught us how to do editing, and they got us to make little mini features. And we had a talk from, I think it was a guy called Mike Craig, who used to run Radio 2. And he came in and he told us sort of 5 or 6 funny anecdotes about Eric Morecambe and Roy Hard and so on. And then he said this very memorable thing, which was that he told us that we were all in show business now. And I really, looking back on that, I really like that, because I sort of hadn't really thought about it that way. I thought, oh, I'm going to go and be a radio producer for the BBC, which sounds terribly proper and kind of, wearing a suit and all that. But actually, we were in show business, and that comes with it a certain amount of kind of implicit sort of bullshit as well. That you have to. There are certain, darling, you were marvelous, all that kind of stuff. Which actually, it's wrong to call that bullshit. It's rather, I think it's very good, because to be funny, you have to be confident, and you have to feel you're surrounded by people that believe in you. And there's an awful lot of sort of uplifting each other, which is really important to this business that we're in, which really properly, genuinely is show business. But also there's a certain amount of playfulness, and I think the more that you realize how valuable that is, I mean, that's kind of at the heart of it, that people are there to play and mess around, and all of the structure of our industry, when it's working properly, is to protect that and nurture it and lean into it and enjoy it. Ultimately, it's people talk about it being funny as a serious business, but the serious part is protecting and nurturing that playfulness and that funniness, and being surrounded by lovies, if you like, is just a long way of saying being surrounded by love. And it's a very positive. It's creating positivity, and that, I think, is it's a joyful thing to spend your time doing. And there. This is a very long answer. I can't remember what your question was even, but
Don't worry, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Carry on.
very good. Well, there's times when it's a terrible slog, or you wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh no, how are we going to do X? Or why haven't I heard back from Y? Or how can we ever afford to do Z? But ultimately, we're there to muck about and have a laugh and be silly and make other people laugh. And that's a joy, really, and a huge privilege.
I'm so thrilled to hear that. And I love what you say about lovies. Working with lovies is being surrounded by love. That's
That's that, yeah. Hooray.
So you mentioned at the beginning of the session that your original intention was to work in television, but you found this job in radio. Had you been a big radio listener? Did you love the medium of radio?
Oh
Any?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I say television. That's sort of a shorthand for saying broadcasting in general. But because I'd started out I started out doing a very serious postgraduate degree, and fairly quickly realized that I didn't care enough about it to work very hard at it.
What was that in? Sorry, Gareth. What was that
It
degree?
was in, very specifically, it was sort of English literature, really, but it was in particular English literature surrounding the Civil War period, and very, very specifically the effects of the English Civil War on people's understanding of the nature of language. It was
Wow. Okay.
it was too big a subject to try and do as a postgrad degree,
Mhm.
and I didn't know enough history, so that was a bit problematic, really. So instead, I frittered away my time writing silly plays and directing plays and putting them on, and then we sort of set up this touring fringe theatre company, which did a very small national tour and ended up at the Edinburgh Festival, and lost so much money that I had to go back and live in my parents' house and apply for some actual jobs.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so slightly inevitable, really. Oh, and also I tried a bit of stand up as well, which was sort of fine, but I wasn't that good at it, and I wasn't awful at it. But I learned that I didn't really mind standing on a stage in front of quite a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then it became increasingly awkward that I didn't really have very much funny to say to them.
Well, you've certainly ended up with the right career then. That's interesting, though. You have an understanding of
Yeah.
comedy from the talent point of view, the performance point of view.
I think that's been really helpful to me because I know why what I'm asking people to do is difficult. And I did more acting than stand up at university, and I thought I was really, really good at acting. And then I worked with this one director who kept telling me how awful I was, to the extent that I completely lost my confidence. And then still did the show, and actually maybe I sort of was better than I had been because I wasn't showing off so much. But then I also thought, oh, right, well, if I was really going to be a good actor, there'd be an awful lot of work to do. And I don't think, and even then I might not be that good. But having been through that awful breaking down process, um, I yeah, I think I know why acting's hard. And I think that's incredibly useful.
There's a very rich history of television comedians and shows starting off in radio and then sort of graduating to television, as it were. And that's not to denigrate radio shows at all, but often that is where they begin. What is the benefit of starting a show on the radio, do you think? What
Oh,
radio
it's
does that television doesn't?
yeah, it's brilliant for that. It's absolutely amazing. And the main reason is that you can take huge risks on the radio. And maybe a good example of that is our beloved sketch Number Wang.
Yes.
Um, so the first ever Number Wang was done on the radio in that Mitchell and Webb sound. And I was shown the script for it. It wasn't by David and Robert. It was by James Sparkman, Mark Evans, and I think based on a discussion they'd had in the pub with David Wollstonecraft, who went on to come up with Spooks. So they wrote this sketch, which was just a meaningless number-based quiz show that I think they basically invented in the pub. And I remember reading it and going, I don't know if this is funny or not. It's very, very strange and it makes me laugh, but it might just be mad. And and if this had been a TV show, I would have looked into the cost of building a set, which I subsequently found out to be about 10 grand, and gone, do you know what? I think we'll just stick with the rest. Let's not do that then. But instead, because it was radio, I showed it to David and Rob, and they went, "Yeah, we think this is funny." And so we did it in a tryout session at the Radio Theatre, and people laughed. And then we did it in an actual recording, and people continued to laugh. And so it was very straightforward to put in the show. But if you tried to, and you lose nothing. If you record it and it doesn't work, you can throw it away, and it's cost you the cost of, several thousand meters of audio tape, and that's all is practically free. Whereas obviously trying it out on TV is terrifyingly expensive. And in fact, the reason we did 6 Number Wangs in the TV series was partly to amortize the terrible cost of building the set. And the fact that, once you've moved that set into the studio, there's not really room for anything else. So we basically sacrificed nearly all our pre-records, as a slightly kind of technical jargony way of thinking about it, but we had to commit to make 6 Number Wangs on this very expensive set, and that was because we had the rotating platform as well, which obviously didn't exist on the radio. But we just thought, well, we need to bring in another visual element. So yeah, that's a very specific example, but more broadly speaking, the amazing thing about radio, and certainly from my career point of view, I went into I was in radio comedy for about 5 years, and during that time, I must have made about 200 hours of sketch comedy, which is, incredible, really. Or maybe that's an exaggeration. Certainly 100 hours of sketch comedy. Because there was this program called Weekending, which I produced, several episodes of every year, or, a couple of series of every year, as well as other related sketch shows. And so, but because that was open to ordinary members of the public to submit to, every week I'd be reading several hundred sketches, and having to narrow it down to the 15 that might be in the final show. And it's incredibly good for your judgment to, well, I don't know, perhaps I don't have good judgment, but what I do definitely have is a sense of what I like. And I think that's really important. As a producer, you have to get in touch with your own feelings. And people sometimes say to me, oh, what do you need to be a producer? And I say, well, the thing you need to be, there's two things that make you a producer. One is telling everyone you're a producer and hoping they'll believe you. And the other is having an opinion. So what that process really helps you with is getting you in touch with that bit of you that rejoices when it encounters something funny. And so you can read a whole sketch and you go, oh, this is a bit boring, this is a bit boring. Oh, that bit about the polar bear is actually funny. Well, I'll put that on one side. And if you don't have that little spark of joy, then it goes in the bin. And that's really sort of the whole process. And then, of course, you need to up the number of polar bear moments. You go, let's go back and find the one which had the joke about the polar bear. I wonder if they could do more with the polar bear. And you sort of build from there and go, well, why don't you introduce the polar bear earlier and make that a bit of a runner, and then just you can do a little callback on it at the end to get us out of the sketch, and then you've got a sketch. But it's having the sensitivity to your own tastes. I often talk about the Father Ted episode with the terrifying priest who likes listening to jungle music late at night, and he says, well, I've had my fun and that's all that matters. And I think that's quite a good instinct for a producer to ultimately, you want to make other people laugh, and you want to make a space that comedians feel they can rejoice and be funny in, but also the way that you can tell if it's working or not is ultimately just your own selfish likes and dislikes. And ultimately, if you're going, no, we've got to keep, there you are in the edit, 6 months later, and the exec comes in and goes, so I don't really, that polar bear stuff doesn't work. Then you've got to, if it's still making you laugh, you have to fight for the polar bear. It's really, really important. That's the whole lifeblood of it. Find the thing that makes you laugh and just embrace it.
Well, look, you obviously are right to trust your instincts, and you obviously do have good judgment, because Number Wang is one of, I think, the most viral, most popular Mitchell and Webb sketches. And I believe they still have it shouted at them in the street sometimes.
Yes, I'm afraid they do.
You worked, as you say, with Mitchell and Webb on the radio first, and I believe you'd met them at Edinburgh
Well,
Fringe.
yes. So in fact, I didn't work with David and Rob on the radio until a bit later. So that was uh, in between my stint at BBC Radio as a trainee entertainment producer. I got um, I got a job offer from Humphrey Barclay, who was at London Weekend Television, which is, sadly not really with us anymore. And he was sort of setting up a new comedy department, and he asked me to go and join them as a development producer for TV, because he'd listened to some of the shows I'd done on the radio and liked them. And while I was there, I was at the Edinburgh Festival looking out for new talent, and I try and do that every year. I think I've been, apart from the pandemic, I think I've been to Edinburgh every year since about 1992. And it makes me so happy. It's such a wonderful place. The whole thing is just a joy. But we can come back to that. Anyway, the point is, I was in an attic in the Pleasance in, I believe it was in 1997, and saw this, I guess you could call it a sketch show, but it had a kind of vague overarching plot by David and Rob. And it was the first time I'd come across them. And I was already enjoying it, even though the attic was tiny and the temperature was sweltering and the seat was incredibly uncomfortable. But there was this moment where they talked about taking a book off a shelf and how taking the book off the shelf dislodged a small quantity of dust, and the sunlight caught the dust, and the dust twinkled in the light from the window. And as well as being a sort of quite funny stepping out of this fairly action-based sitcom to make this observation, I thought it was very poetic, and that really appealed to me. That you can, there had been a lot of jokes. It was very silly. There were people dressed up as robots and all sorts of mad stuff going on. But also there was this sort of lovely observation of the nature of life. And I kind of fell in love with them a bit. And I think I often talk about finding talent as being a bit like falling in love. You are looking for something that speaks specifically to you, and I don't think I don't think it works just sitting there going, oh, I see they've got this comedian's got 100 laughs and this comedian only got 85 laughs, so I'm going to work with this comedian. It can't really work like that. They've got to be your laughs, and they've got to be speaking to you. So that, you know, again, it's a sort of a selfishness or being in touch with your own comic instinct. And here were two people who just felt very, very close to my own comic instincts. There was a playfulness, but also a kind of a poetry to it. And so because this was the olden days, I wrote them a note and I left it in their pigeonhole. And I said, hello, I'm Gareth and I'm a development producer at the London Weekend. You know, here's my number. After the Fringe, let's get in touch or something. And very pleasingly they did. And you know, we kept on thinking of things we might do together and tried a few different ideas, and eventually got our radio sketch away. So London Weekend ceased to exist. It was sort of bought out by Granada. And so I went back to the BBC at that point in, I guess, 1999 or something. And so it was actually there that we got away the first Mitchell and Webb project, which was the radio series.
And how important is it to nurture those relationships? Because obviously that relationship that you've had with them has been very long lasting. They give you so much credit when they talk about their shows and talk with as much love about you as you do about them. Do all producers work in this way? Is that important, generally speaking, or are you unusual in that sense?
I don't know. The funny thing about being a producer is you don't really know what other producers do because we never watch each other work. So I can't imagine that anyone would say relationships aren't important. I think they have to. It must be must be at the heart of it, mustn't it? So I think if you surround yourself with, if you build up those relationships and try and build up, if you like, a sort of a creative partnership with people who feel as though they're on your comic wavelength, I think that's got to be the sort of fundamental building block to being a producer, really. And of course, you know, as you go on in your career, you learn how to because you can't only work with people who you've known right from the start. So the, you then learn how to deploy those relationship building skills to people who might already be established. And, sometimes I'm brought in on a show that sort of already existed and so on. And in those situations, you're trying to build up new relationships with people who've, maybe been working for, 40 years before you ever turned up. And that's very rewarding too, because you're sort of finding the common ground and finding the ways in which you might share a sense of humor, or that kind of thing.
And how did the Mitchell and Webb sketch shows then graduate to TV? Was it you that moved to TV and took them with you, or how did that come about?
No, not really. I remember I wrote this very simple pitch document that was went something along the lines of Mitchell and Webb worked on the radio. I expect it'll probably work on the telly, don't you? It was a bit more elaborate than that. It was a sort of question and answer thing. But there'd been quite a long list of other shows that had done a very similar progression. And obviously, famously, you've got League of Gentlemen, and Little Britain also did that, and Dead Ringers. So it used to be, and I hope it's, and actually, of course, goodness gracious me, began on the radio, but actually that was slightly different, and it was kind of reverse engineered. So Anil Gupta had already got this whole idea for a TV show. And then he came to me and said, is there a way we could maybe try and get that on the radio? And so I helped with that part of the process. But because radio is, I'm trying to think of a polite way of saying cheaper, but because radio is cheaper and more forgiving, it's a really, really great place to try things out and develop things. And so it does work as a really good route into TV. And that works both on a whole program level, but also on a performer and writer level as well. Like if you wanted to try and write a TV sitcom, and you're going to a company and saying, hey, would you like to pilot my TV sitcom? And they go, well, what experience have you got? You go, well, no, this is my first TV sitcom. You're essentially saying, could I have several £100,000 to try this idea out? Whereas if you're doing it on the radio, it's a far less terrifying thing you're asking, because essentially you could probably get it on for 10 grand, and people are less likely to laugh you out of court. I mean, obviously everyone loves to be laughed at. It's comedy industry, but that would be in a bad way. Get out of here. So it's, the other thing is, by the time we got the TV series, we knew we had a fairly decent amount of material that already worked. So that was a really nice way to start off. And there were several things where we thought, well, that didn't really work quite so well, we won't bring that across, or that's very clearly just a radio joke, we won't bring that across. But there was enough material there that we already felt we had a pretty solid foundation for doing the series.
It was hugely successful, and in fact, over the 15 years that it hasn't been on television, it's never actually gone away online. A whole new generation have discovered those sketches over the last 15 years. Certainly, every time there is something in the news that seems relevant, that famously the We Are the Baddies sketch pops up and goes viral time and time again. And of course, during COVID, Remain Indoors, kept popping up again. So it's never gone away. But sketch comedy did sort of die a death, didn't it? Why do you think that was? Why? I mean, David and Rob have both spoken about the fact they would have done it again in a heartbeat. And I don't know if you feel the same way,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it simply disappeared and nobody wanted to commission it for a long time. Can you say why that would be?
I've never really understood why, to be honest. So perhaps I'm the wrong person to ask, because like David and Rob, I wanted to carry on doing it. And I think oddly, it was partly just fashion. and everyone got very interested in, I don't know, I remember reading a review, I think it was of The Office, and it said cringing is the new laughing. And I thought, oh, that's a shame. I prefer laughing. And I just, obviously The Office is a work of genius, and actually there are plenty of laughs in it. Um, but there was a sort of sense for a while that perhaps just being silly, and actually I don't think we are just silly. We have quite big, complicated ideas and sometimes deal with quite big emotions. But because it's all done with a silly hat on, if you like, um, it tends not to be taken seriously. And maybe the world got much more interested in, this is like fantastically funny, clever things like Fleabag, or that shows that as well as having jokes, somehow seem to be making a big important point about the nature of the society that we live in. I think people got drawn into that more, and wanted to do shows that felt as though they were making an important social comment. I'm not. It's very hard to say, but I think comedy started taking itself quite seriously. And I know there are sort of arguments about, oh, sketch shows are too expensive, or I mean that was a key one, but I don't think it's especially true, and it's certainly not true now, because if you look at some of the comedies on streamers, their budgets are way more than we could ever dream of. And actually, we shot the whole series in 5 weeks, which is, it was intense, but that means it wasn't all that expensive. And you spend more on sets and more on costumes and more on scripts, because it's very important to throw away some of the scripts. But on the other hand, you're you're able to get away with certain shorthands in terms of, so trying to think of the polite ways of saying this. It doesn't
Don't worry
matter if
about
it
being
looks a
polite,
bit shit sometimes.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
as I understand it, the new series that's now on Channel 4 rather than BBC came about because Ian Katz, head of Channel 4, commissioning, had a chance meeting with Jesse Armstrong, who of
Yeah.
course had done Peep Show with David and Rob many years ago. He was also famous for doing Succession. They had a chance lunch, and I believe Ian said, said to Jesse, "Do you think David and Rob would like to do some more sketch?" And Jesse said, "Hell yeah." Is that correct?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've heard it via, the grapevine, in the same way that you have. But I think I'm not sure whether the suggestion of sketch came from Jesse or from Ian. But certainly David and Rob have always been clear that they would love to do more sketch. And I think what's been exciting is that finally somebody listened to that. 'Cause it does. I mean, if I felt that we had uh, revived the sketch show, I'd be so thrilled. I mean, it was such an important part of my childhood. And we all used to love watching sketch shows. It was just brilliant, and it's also such an important part of our creative culture. And if you look back at all of the great British sitcoms, I would say 90% of them have their roots in sketch shows. You've got people like Ronnie Barker was a sketch performer, and John Cleese was a sketch performer, and writers too. They're all, or even, David Jason started out doing sketches, but also the people writing these sketch shows, these sitcoms, learnt their trade doing sketch. So it's always fed into the sort of the creative environment in a really, really important way. And I hope it can carry on doing that forever.
So when you brought this series to fruition, Mitchell and Webb are not helping. Somebody, and you can tell me who, came up with the genius idea of bringing on board 4 younger writer performers to be in the writer's room and to also appear in the sketches. So they were Stevie Martin, Lara Racotte, Kyle Smith Bino, and Krystal Evans. Tell me, whose idea was that, and why did you want to get these younger guys on board with you?
Well, I think the sort of initial spark for that, I think, would come from Charlie Perkins and Joe Hulett at Channel 4. And, obviously Charlie knows the up and coming comedian scene better than anyone. I think she's always been really, really committed to that.
Charlie's the commissioner.
Charlie is the head of comedy at commissioning at Channel 4, and Joe was our commissioning exec. And of course, I hope my career shows the importance I would attach to being aware of who the new talent is as well. And David and Rob are sort of instinctively very nurturing people, and so it felt, that really appealed, the idea of how can we help the next generation of sketch comedians. It felt like a natural fit. So from the moment the idea came up, I think we all embraced it. And but I think essentially it fitted in very well with Charlie's vision for what she wanted to do with Channel 4 comedy as well. Because it's very difficult to say to a new sketch comic, great, here's have a series on Channel 4. It's very hard because it's such a big hurdle from doing some sketches online to doing 3 hours of, nearly 3 hours of sketch comedy in that kind of slightly more intimidating glare of both literal and metaphorical of TV filming. But also, the other thing is, I always thought it would be kind of quite fun to be in a writer's room with a new generation of writers who might, on some level, make me and David and Rob feel a little bit awkward. because they'd be thinking new things and have different attitudes. And I mean, in a way, actually, I didn't really have my wish, because when everyone came into the room, we all got on tremendously well, and it was lovely, and the atmosphere was always very, very positive. But it did make us sort of look at things from a slightly different angle, and obviously, while we do all live in the same world, there are certain experiences that people under 40 or under 30 are going to have that are unknown to people in their 40s and 50s. So it widened the horizons of the show a lot, and it brought in an extra amount of playfulness.
So this feels like a really good moment, Gareth, to introduce 2 of the 4 writer performers that we've been talking about. So should we welcome Krystal and Stevie?
Great.
Hello.
Hey. Hey.
Hi, you 2. Welcome. How are you?
Good. Very good.
Yeah, I'm good. Yep. Hello.
Good. Riding high on all the excellent reviews and audience figures and so on, I hope.
Oh, yes. Very across the audience figures. We get updates constantly. But no, the reviews have been so nice, haven't they? The reviews have been lovely.
It's been really cool to see. Yeah.
Absolutely. Very well deserved. Well, look, I was just talking to Gareth about the idea of bringing the four of you onto Mitchell and Webb Are Not Helping. So let me get your point of view on that. How did you feel when you were approached? Did you know Mitchell and Webb's work from previous years or not?
Krystal, would you like
Me
to go
first. Yes, I did. I was a huge fan growing up, like as a teen and in my early 20s and stuff in the US. I was a really weird kid who I loved British humor, and I would just like seek it out online and watch episodes of Mitchell and Webb and stuff, and then of course, Peep Show eventually. But yeah, I'm a huge fan for years and years, and I got the email from my agent just saying that they were doing a new sketch show, and I was like even just like if I wasn't involved in it, I would have been so excited to see that they were bringing back the sketch show. So yeah, I mean, I never dreamed that I'd get a chance to actually be on the cast, but yeah, that was very exciting for me. So yeah.
And
Yeah,
Stevie?
I hated them. Absolutely
Yeah.
hated them. I don't find them very
How
funny.
awkward.
Yeah. No, when I was at uni, I was in a sketch, like the uni sketch group, and I sort of came up through sketch comedy, and Mitchell and Webb was sort of, I think the last series of that Mitchell and Webb look was on when I was at uni or thereabouts, and so that was one of the ones that we would watch all the time. They were so big on YouTube and so big online, which is quite unusual. I feel like for those kind of even shows like Big Train and stuff. Obviously they've got the Bash Show. Obviously you can find their sketches online, but Mitchell and Webb seems like way more online, which is odd considering as guys they're not like hugely online. Do you know what I mean? Like they're not like
Yeah.
David Mitchell's special is not particularly understanding what social media is. But yeah, and so same as Krista, really, I couldn't really believe I was asked to do it. And I came at a point in my career where I kind of very gently and kindly and with love given up at the fact that I would have to be able to do sketch comedy on TV. I just didn't think it was going to be possible for me. So I was doing online stuff, and that was really fun. But to be able to do it on TV was just like, oh great! Like I've managed to pick something off that I'd crossed off already because I thought it was not applicable anymore.
Is that because it had, I mean, Gareth and I have been talking about how it has obviously fallen out of fashion, and it's been 15 years since Mitchell and Webb's last TV show was on. There hasn't been very much on television since then. Is that why you had given up on that idea?
Well, I was in a sketch group for a couple of well, no, we did 2 live shows, and then it was at a time when what it sounds crazy to say, there wasn't very many all-female sketch groups at this time, and so we were sort of treated in the industry quite as an exciting prospect, and then nobody could make a sketch show with us. No one knew how to do it, and we did everything we could really to get it, and it would get so far, and they wouldn't release. They just couldn't go that extra mile. So it just became like, well, and then when I was doing online stuff, my online stuff did really, really well over lockdown. And I had about 5 million meetings of people going, how can we translate this to TV? And I'd be like, a sketch show. And they'd be like, no. So, but like I got to I made like a sketch show short myself. And I kind of like, I was enjoying doing it for the sake of doing it. I was just like reimagining what was possible for me. So even if I never get to do it again, it's just brilliant to have been able to have done it, and not just done it with the people that when I not grew up because I was like 21, but like I would still, yeah, I would, they were my kind of heroes of sketch world. So very bizarre.
So the two of you, along with Lara and Kyle, and of course David, Rob, and Gareth, get in this writers' room, and there are various other writers, I think, coming in and out, of course. But tell me, each of you, about your experience of those writers' rooms together, because Gareth, you hadn't done that previously in this way, particularly.
Oh no, we've always done writers' rooms.
Not with writers' performance.
Oh, well, no, when the BBC series, we did with a writer's room as well, and it would be, it was a mix. So we had James Sparkman and Mark Evans, who was sometimes in the show, would also be regulars in the writers' room. But yeah, there were probably, because it was a smaller ensemble, and not everyone in the ensemble was a writer performer. That dynamic was slightly different, but yeah, we actually had Jesse Armstrong and Sam Bain were in the writers' room sometimes as well. And
What happened to those guys?
nobody knows.
Where
It's
are they
really
now?
quite sad, really. Off doing whatever Olivia Colman's doing, I suppose. And it's sort of people just fall off the radar, don't they?
So these four sort of younger writer performers in the writers' room, you said to me earlier before they joined the call that you almost hoped that they would make you, David and Rob, feel a bit awkward, a bit old. But actually
Yeah.
it didn't happen.
Didn't happen really, no. I mean, I guess I think the thing is I was hoping there might be a bit of a sort of a challenge, if you like, to some of our probably quite middle-aged ideas, but actually it turns out everyone just likes laughing, so it was just the amount of laughing in the writers' rooms got, I mean, I think possibly quite dangerous at certain points in
I
terms
felt like I
of
was hyperventilating.
Yes.
Like my
Yeah.
face would get tingly and I would feel like I was going to pass out sometimes. I was laughing so much, especially when like they would taking up. Actually, either if someone would say like such a bad idea, that was really funny, and it'd be like yeah, and then everyone would. But then often the bad ideas, someone would, because everyone was so nice and no one wanted to be like no and then move on. So someone would then go, obviously not, but then be like, oh, but you could. And then those ideas would turn into like often like sketches that would then be written up. Like
Yeah.
That's so interesting because Gareth and I have been talking about having a very open heart and an open mind and trusting your instincts. So, Krystal, would you agree with that as well? Was that a vital part of the writers' rooms, just to have an open mind?
Oh yeah, completely. You have to just let go of your kind of inhibition of I had a few ideas that were really crazy and I was afraid to say them. But then once you do, you realize that nothing's really, even if it is stupid, like you say, it's like it's just better to just get it out there. Like I had this idea that never ended up getting used because it was stupid. But it was like like me, I just imagined like me as a kid watching Mitchell and Webb and like loving British humor. And I was like, if they had hired an American back then, I would think they sold out. And now they have. And I'm like, I'm so glad it's me, obviously. But it was maybe too meta. But I'm glad I put it out there, like all those kind of like, things that are where you're making fun of them or you're making fun of yourself like feel kind of risky, but then sometimes the best humor is in that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was loads of fun. So
I thought you were going to reference your squirrel storage sketch, which
hey, that was a
is a work of genius.
That was a great idea. I stand by that.
It was a great brackets
Too high budget.
great idea.
Yeah.
Involving some confusion over what squirrel storage might actually. I think is squirrel storage actually a real company as well.
It was really highbrow. You don't get into that.
Would have involved a lot of very highly trained squirrels.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The squirrel trainer was the main
sit in one of these writers' rooms. It just sounds like a ball. For most of us, the majority of us who have never sat in a writer's room, could someone tell me what actually happens? Do you walk in? Is there a table full of like tea and biscuits? And do you literally just go, hey guys, I've got an idea about squirrels? Is that literally what it is?
Gareth would start. So Gareth would go like, okay, I've got a rubbish idea, and to make everyone feel better. And it was always it was never rubbish, Gareth, but it was always like a thing that happened to him, or like a one, and then you, because there was always, every time, even like the fifth time that me and Krystal were in there would always be each week 2 new writers, because they had very experienced writers who've written for them before writing for the show, but they also had 2 people that they'd found maybe at the Fringe, or they'd found like through online, who maybe haven't been in writers rooms, or quite young and whatever. And so you could see like them going, oh, okay, this is what happens when you say something that you're not sure about. Everyone will. So then it, like, Gareth would like set the blueprint. But yeah, a lot of like braised bars, a lot of grape, satsumas, and someone just regularly saying like coffee, and then I would say like, oh, could I have a matcha? And they'd be like, no. Like, yeah, sorry, yeah, sorry, a normal one. Yes, that would be it.
Sounds like heaven. And then what happens, Gareth, after that? How does that, the following weeks or months, then turn into the TV show?
Oh, right. Well, we get so during the writers' meeting, I'd allocate, so if somebody was the main person contributing to an idea, or if it was originally their idea, I might say, Krystal, Stevie, could you write that up? And then they'll write it up, and sort of over the months, I'd get sent in sketches, and then this was sort of through the autumn, and then by Christmas we had a huge pile of sketches. I mean, really a lot more than we could possibly make. And I think the final show's got about 70 sketches in it. But, at that stage, we probably had between 200 and 300 sketches. And I think that's quite an important part of doing a sketch show, that you want to feel sad at the sketches you can't do, rather than feel desperate that you haven't got quite enough stuff. So I'll tell you what, I might as well do this one that no one's quite sure of. So at that point, then David, Rob, and I start going through them and saying, okay, well, not this one, not that one, maybe this one with a rewrite, that kind of thing. And then we also did a tryout session at Channel 4, actually, in the basement of Channel 4, in their kind of conference room, with some of the sketches we weren't, that was sort of borderline, to see which ones got laughs. And if I'd have loved to have done more of those, actually. I think they're incredibly useful, but
so
just
fun.
Timing wise, it didn't really quite work out. But I think any chance you have to expose the comedy to the harsh glare of actual people laughing or not laughing is to be seized with both hands. It's really useful. And also, just partly, I don't know if this resonates with you too, Stevie and Krystal, but that there are some sketches where performing it, you might feel a little bit sick, because you just suddenly go, oh, right, I suddenly realized this line isn't really delivering. And that slightly horrible feeling, which I even get watching it, you go, oh, I've sent these poor people out to try and get a laugh with this terrible joke.
It was quite odd to go into Channel, for me anyway, to be going into Channel 4 to perform stuff that by definition we're not sure about. It's like, if I'm ever going to be in front of industry, I'll be doing my absolute top tier. But it was quite freeing and quite liberating to be like that. And it was definitely like maybe 3 or 4 that I was involved in that was like, the moment I sat down, I was like, that's not going in. But that everyone was on the same page, everyone was we're all trying out. So it's quite baller to do that.
I mean, and I think also in the past, when we'd done that for the TV shows, we'd done it just in a pub, and normal members of the public could come along, so we could just, but because of the modern world that we're in, we thought, oh well, then you might get people coming along and writing a review of our not ready and actually definitely half-baked ideas,
or filming it or recording it on the audio or something.
Rob and David,
so we had to be much more protective of it. But I think I still think it's a really, really useful process. And you have to not mind if people hate it, because that's a lesson too.
I do that constantly in stand-up, so I'm like, I liked that, because I was like, oh good, now we know for sure that this is not good, or this is great, or people really love this like we suspected, or whatever. It's an immediate immediate feedback, so it was great.
One of the great joys of sketch generally, I suppose, is that there's something for everybody, right? We will all have slightly different favorites. And I think one of the joys of Mitchell and Webb particularly, and this is sort of a bit what you were saying, I guess, Stevie, about the fact these have lived online in a way that perhaps other sketch shows haven't. There is a timelessness, I think, about the humour and a lot of the sketches. I don't know if you agree with that.
I think so, but I also think there's a bias. So the sketches that have lived online for their old shows are the ones that were good.
Or
the ones that were broader. and the ones that were more, and then the ones that like are more niche, that are for the few, not the many. And also saying good or bad, I think, is a terrible way to describe comedy, because that's the whole point. But I think that I've forgotten the question. I've just got so overwhelmed that I've just said that some of their sketches weren't good. But look, it's hit and miss.
No,
that's the joy of sketch. But like, there's timelessness. Yeah, but I think they are. I think they are. As Gareth said before, like there's not really much difference generationally between that, because they do just want to be silly, and also their characterization within their own like duo is so clear. It's really fun to write for Rob. It's really fun to write for David, and so, and like that's just sort of what makes them so great, I think, and what makes the series work. And I was really like calm that they were sort of overseeing. Like we were all writing something. The last word would come from them, and it's like I trust them. I'm very happy to do what they think is funny.
Do you know the other scary thing about, I've just suddenly thought, what makes some sketches have an online life is, we put a lot of ideas out there in the sketches, and then over the subsequent years, society comes up with something horrendous that suddenly makes that sketch relevant. Like when we did Remain Indoors, we didn't think, I expect there'll be some horrible apocalyptic event where everyone has to remain indoors. It turns out that was coming down the tracks at us. And just very recently, that sketch that we did about, have you tried running Kill All the Poor through the computer and see what suddenly some people are actually literally having a go at doing that. But we were hoping that wouldn't become a searing documentary.
That's because your style, the Mitchell and Webb style is like, broad's the wrong word, but like this universal kind of like, almost like, maybe philosophical is not the right, but it's like this kind of like, a general noticing of something about society or history, and that would be like long lasting, and because comedy is so classically ages quicker than anything, but if you're doing these kind of, that's just kind of what they're best at, is the kind of noticing something that's really, really like long lasting. My brain is, I'm not coming up with the right words, but
well, I mean, it's like that reminds me a bit of the Puritans sketch, where we've essentially got some people in entertaining hats sitting around trying to out ideology each other in the way that people do now, but also that they used to do in the 17th century.
It's exactly that. I think the Puritans clip is a great example, because it works on those levels. And actually, Krystal, I quite like the word philosophical for that. Should we take a look at the Puritans clip?
Right, I call to order this week's meeting of the Church Elders of New Scunthorpe.
Are we sticking with Scunthorpe? At the last meeting, I thought we said we'd pick somewhere nicer, like New Bath or New Cheltenham.
Hang on. What's this new business? Why is everyone saying new now?
New is a new way of saying new, or as I prefer, new.
Why do we need a new way of saying new?
Just starting to feel more natural, like my mom was saying.
Like your what? What is going on?
We don't know. There's something new in the air. For me, it's just saying new, but for others, it's more, ask Tabitha to say squirrel.
Yeah, good one. Say squirrel, Tabitha. Say the squirrel looked in the mirror.
The squirrel looked in the mirror?
What's the problem?
Nothing. It's nothing.
Is not laughter sinful?
Oh, Christ. Sorry, Lord.
Shun him. Shun him, for he is a papist and a blasphemer. Shun him!
Shun him! No. I didn't mean it. I repent.
Repentance is not for this life, devil. Do you go to confession with your new papist friends?
No, of course not. This is New England.
New England, Satan?
New England! And there are no Catholics here at all, apart from in the French bit.
He has knowledge of the French bit. He celebrates the French bit's ways with their dancing and cuisine and knee tremblers.
What do you know of knee tremblers, Jezebel whore? She speaks of knee tremblers. Shun her!
Shun her!
Shun her! Take her hat buckle.
No, not my hat buckle. I need it for if my head changes size.
As well it might, as your head swells with the sexual flattery of Lucifer.
He said sexual! Shun him!
Shun him!
No,
Shun him! Shun him!
You, no!
Just a thought. Is Lucy short for Lucifer?
I don't think so.
That's a relief. I've got a daughter called Lucy.
He has a daughter called Lucifer. The devil has sprung from his loins. Shun him!
Shun him!
Yes, shun him, but also shun her, for she said loins.
I meant lions, but I'm dyslexic.
Shun her, for she is dyslexic.
Shun the dyslexic!
Shun her!
Sorry. Can I just say, this is all very well, but this is why we get very little done in these meetings.
Shun him!
Shun!
I'm already shunned.
Shun him again for good measure!
Fuck off, Andrew.
It's exactly that. It's the perfect example of that broad range, as I guess Krystal was saying, of all the different types of humour. And Gareth, there are, I suppose, other sort of differences between the sketches in that some are quite visual, quite big, some are more like two-handers or the writers' rooms. Could you talk me through the differences between those types of sketches?
Well, I mean, I guess one of the big difference is the price tag. So you know, I mean, I'm very, very proud of the writers' room sketches for a number of reasons. First, I just love the dynamic, and it feels quite authentic, and it feels like each of the different writer performers is getting to be not exactly the real life version of themselves, but there's a real sense of the chemistry of the room. But the other thing I'm very proud of about them is that we filmed 26 pages in one day.
Yeah.
And everyone
Wild.
it was insane, but everyone was so great. And this is, you know, I never want to miss an opportunity to praise everyone, cast and crew, because everyone was so on their lines. The booms were all in the right place at the right moment. The camera moves were all there. And but the reason, partly the reason for doing that is all my life I've loved meta jokes. And the moment, you know, a look to camera or somebody saying, you know, what are we doing in this episode, or anything where that fourth wall gets taken down, I absolutely love. I find it endlessly entertaining. And this feels like a lovely way of being able to do that each week. So there's the kind of creative playfulness that I've always loved. But the other thing is, doing 26 pages in one day allows you to spend one day doing 26 seconds. You know, so we had this mad sketch involving a very expensive suitcase being taken around a hotel, and everyone who looks at the suitcase vomits or explodes or drops down dead or whatever, and that took ages. Absolutely ages to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't mind, because you know that one moment like that shows this huge, big, expensive looking canvas. And you go, okay, so here's one end of the extreme of production value. And meanwhile, you know, that makes it a lot easier not to feel a bit oppressed by you know 3 minutes of two people having a chat. So it gives you texture, and I think that's really, really important in a sketch show. You just want to change the mood regularly, and you can make a sort of a quite small canvas sketch really sing if you put it either side of it something quite big and silly.
Should we take a look at the suitcase clip in case anybody's missed it or would like a reminder?
Let's see the suitcase.
A suitcase isn't just a suitcase. It's a symbol. Our newest suitcase doesn't just carry your clothes. It carries the envy of anyone who dare lay eyes on it. 4 sliding wheels. 5 levels of readjustable handles. I know. Cannonite suitcase. It will fuck you up.
Big favourite of mine too, so I'm glad we chose to show that one. Stevie and Krystal, tell me a little about actually filming the sketches, having been in the writer's room. Did anything surprise you about the process? Was there anything that you particularly enjoyed that you want to share with us from behind the scenes?
I particularly enjoyed vomiting into that bag.
Yeah.
That was one of my highlights because it was a very easy day. I think I was all out to do that day. Came in, got hair and makeup, sat in a chair for ages, vomit, trying different things as well. So I had one where it was like I was really insistent that we do at least 1 or 2 takes with actual stuff in my mouth. And I was like, did you? And I was like, no, I think I'll do it. And then I'm like, okay. And then it like lined the bag, and then it was like innocent coconut, which is delicious. But then of course I wanted to smile and be like, and then I'd be vomiting, and I couldn't. So I think I haven't seen the rushes, but I do feel like when I looked up with the vomit already in my mouth to go, I was like, I don't think, I think it's really clear that I'm holding a smoothie in my mouth like a squirrel, like Krystal squirrels that should have been in the show. But yeah, that was it. Was those days were really fun, like where you just have to do like I really like doing visual, silly, physical things, and obviously Mitchell and Webb got much more of a talking based. You know, that's their happy place. But then it was really fun to have other stuff that like David throwing himself downstairs, which is definitely him.
Great.
You know.
Krystal, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, this was my first major acting job, really. So it's my first time. I've been on like, big professional film sets before, but not as, I guess, one of the main cast. So it was kind of, it was a learning curve for me. And it was really incredible. It was really, really cool. And I think I did a really good job of pretending like I knew what I was doing most of the time. So that was a relief. But my favorite thing to film that I'll never forget would be when I was doing the Sweary Aussies. It was, I mean, that all those were incredible because it was great to be able to, just let out a spew of the worst swears you can think of. And then have everyone also give me abuse back. It was great. And have it all be okay. But I had to film a sex scene with Lara, and it was absolutely incredible. It's like we're having sex behind a hay bale, and then Rob punches me in the face for having sex with his wife, and it was just beautiful. It was I'll never forget it. We tried different ways of having sex, and what would be the funniest way to do it, and there was points when my hat was like bouncing too much, and it was all great stuff. It was all super inappropriate, and I loved doing it. So
that's my favorite Flurry Aussie drama episode.
That is
one.
great. That bit.
Yeah, my favorite. And then Kyle comes in and does his line, which is one of my favorite lines as well. Like it's really good.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
It is such a joy to hear that it is also a joy to make. We sometimes hear about comedy being a little bit stressful or having a lot of pressure. And I know when I spoke to David and Rob a few weeks ago, they were saying that towards the end of making the BBC show all those years ago, they were both finding a lot of stress and pressure, and that this time they were able to really relax and just enjoy themselves. And it really sounds like that has kind of drip fed down to everybody. So I just wonder, for those people watching who are breaking into their careers, can you just tell them a bit about what it is like to make comedy? Is there stress and pressure? Is it fun? Tell me a little bit about what they can expect.
No stress, no pressure at all.
Never, no.
So easy. No, it's really stressful. Like I will say, the first week that we did it, I was really stressed because I had a scene, a sketch that didn't make it into the show that I couldn't get. I just couldn't get it, and it was my first one, and it was with David and Robert, and I became incredibly starstruck and incredibly overwhelmed. And I'd learnt my lines. I'm really good. I'm really on my lines, but I couldn't remember them because I was just so like I felt like a rabbit in the headlights. I felt like I'd never, like when you walk on stage for the first time and you've not done stand up ever. Like that's what I felt like. And then the next day I had the ABBA monologue, and I was like, oh my God. But then I did that very well. So I was like, okay, we're fine. So I think there is always stress and there is always pressure, but I feel like I can apportion it like good stress and bad stress. And you have to choose your stress because all jobs are stressful. And if you pick something, that horrible quote of like, pick something you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life or something like that. You're like, no, you will. And you'll be like, but I love this. What? Should I be doing this? But actually, it's better stress than anything else. And I think like because the highs of like it all coming together and being a team and someone else like because I'd had that like freak out like on day one, by the way. There was someone that came in to do like a bit part and they were freaking out a bit and I was like told them and they were like, oh right, so this is a normal thing. I was like, yes, this is so normal. Like it's such a weird to come in and have to, and then it's like a big learning thing, and you can I actually can feel the more I do comedy and the more experience I have, my brain sort of like chemistry changing in a really positive way. That's
Krystal, how about you?
Yeah, similar. My first day of filming, I was filming a sketch that ended up getting cut where I was a woman and David Mitchell was my dildo, and I didn't think that David would actually come in to do his own lines because he wasn't actually on camera, but he did. And it was like everybody around, same as Stevie, it was like I knew my lines and I was like, action. And I was just, I completely went blank. It was fine after that, but it was super stressful. And it was, but you just have to almost find a place in your mind of being a little bit like above yourself sometimes and like looking down and being like, okay, I'm doing this, but I just have to get through it. And then eventually you're like, oh yeah, I did that today. And there was a day when we were filming Hot Seat with all the guest star stand-ups comedians who like I know most of them, and I told them, I was like, listen, because we're stand-ups, I'm like, we're used to getting laughs, but when you say your funny stuff up there, nobody's gonna laugh because everyone needs to be quiet. It's a film set, but you're not bombing, you're not dying on stage. It's like, don't worry. And they were like, oh right, okay, yeah. and so yeah, you have to kind of switch your mind out a little bit. But yeah, there's loads of stress, but it's, yeah, I mean, I suppose any job has stress, but like Stevie said, like, once you get through it, and it's done and it's like, it's so worth it. And yeah, so just keep doing it, I guess, is the thing.
Yeah, and doing it as many different ways as possible as well.
Yes.
So like, there's so many different routes into the industry now, and to try to like utilize all of them, I think, is a really smart thing to get experience in as many ways as possible.
Yeah.
And Gareth, I don't know whether you sort of agreed with David and Rob's sort of summary of those final years at the BBC being a little bit pressurized and this series feeling different. Did it feel the same to you as well?
I don't know. I think what was lovely was, for me, doing the new series, was that David and Rob were still making each other laugh, and there was still a really lovely comic chemistry between the two of them. But also, I was thrilled by the way that the ensemble seemed to come together, and everyone seemed to enjoy each other's sense of humor. There was a real chemistry and a real positivity, and I'm really pleased to hear Krystal talk about encouraging the some of the other acts who came into the hot seat, and I'm really proud to think that this is a show where people's instincts are to nurture each other and lift each other up and encourage each other, because to me, a sort of positive, nurturing, reinforcing environment is the best way for making comedy. The idea of people undermining each other or any kind of competitive toxicity, I think, is fatal to the kind of comedy I want to make. I think just also we briefly talked about stress, and One thing I think it's really important to say to any kind of aspiring comedy makers out there is everyone feels stress, and that's fine. And ultimately, you do need to work out your own sort of mantra for stepping out of it or rising above it, as Krystal said. And my own personal one, or I have several little mantras, but the shortest one, which is probably what we've got time for here, is just to say, no matter what happens, nobody's allowed to have you killed. So it's fine. It's fine. The first guy I worked for back in BBC Radio was this magnificent man called Jonathan James Moore, who talked very often about permission to fail. And it's absolutely fine to have a go and get it wrong. And that's what'll happen in comedy. It won't always work, but you've got to not mind and keep going.
Yeah, I'm on tour at the moment, and like I'm basically 24/7 listening to seeking out podcasts where very famous celebrities talk about when they've felt really underconfident, have got imposter syndrome and have messed up. Like, and it's so soothing to me. And I think those things are really helpful because you can just everyone's different, but I feel like we all kind of share a seed of that where you go, am I just bad? And and I would say nearly 99% of the time you're not bad. 1% of the time you might be, but that's okay. You can be bad at it.
Okay. I think that's okay too, is really useful.
Yeah.
It's all right to be a bit shit sometimes.
Oh yeah, we're always a bit shit.
I mean, I'm going to go away and get out several notes, and one of them is going to be, it's okay to be a bit shit sometimes, and one of them is going to be, nobody is allowed to have you killed. This is all super helpful advice, guys. This has been the most uplifting, lovely session. We started off, Gareth and I, talking about how important it is to trust your instincts, to be very open, to make sure that when producing or writing comedy that you are making yourself laugh first and foremost, which Gareth described as being a bit selfish, but I'm not sure that's right. I think it's just trusting yourself and trusting your instincts. And then Stevie, that was super interesting what you just said about lots of different routes into this industry and just having a go at all of them. So lots and lots of really helpful bits of advice there, which I'm sure will be incredibly useful for those watching. But I just wonder, to wrap up, whether you can each give a few more nuggets of wisdom or a little pep talk to people who are watching, who are thinking about breaking into the industry, who want to know how to do it. I don't know who would like to start.
I'll start. I think just you got to keep creating things is a thing. You have to keep. I think that the thing that Stevie said, if I could steal it, is the thing of trying different ways in is really, really important. I've noticed that with comedians, like both really famous, successful ones and ones just starting out. We all have, if you want to be in comedy, I think we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And like, there's some comedians that are so funny online, like so funny online, and maybe not great at certain other things. And then there's people who are great on stage, great live, and not great at the online stuff, terrible at it. And then so you really have to keep searching for the thing that you are best at. And I think, rather than trying to get better at something that you maybe don't have a knack for, like just build on the thing that you are good at and that you like the best and that you're the most passionate about. If you like, because it would be so easy now to, as a new comedian or maybe as a middle-aged comedian, to be like, oh, I have to do online sketches or I have to do clips. I have to because that's what everybody's doing, and that seems to be the ticket to everything. But like, everything fades and everything changes, just there's a way, like there's a place for you if you hopefully have some. You do have to have some talent, like you do have to have something, but I think that's like when I first started comedy, I think we all maybe go through this, but I was like, oh, I want to be the type of comedian that can play any room. I want to be able to adapt to every
Doesn't exist. It doesn't
it's so
exist. Some
it
some
that doesn't
audiences
exist.
won't like you. They just
Yeah,
won't like you.
because even the best comedian you can think of has bombed a million times. We've all
Yeah.
seen it now. So like you know, as you keep doing comedy, you're like, oh, we all fail. But then
Yeah.
actually, you shouldn't have to cater to a room of people who aren't going to like you anyway. You know, so you're better off building the people who do like what you do, and having, you know, the audience that eventually is gonna be your audience come to you and be really faithful to what you do. So yeah, that's my
Yeah.
advice.
And mine would be to be kind to yourself, because and a bit patient, because there's a lot of like fear of like, oh, I'm getting older and I want to achieve this and I should be here. And I didn't start till I was, well, properly professionally till I was 30, but I did start
Same.
when I was 27. But like I was doing it on the side of my job in like a casual way. But the first time I like quit my job and was like, I'm gonna, and I speak to lots of younger people who are just like, oh well, I've picked a drama school, or I've got a job and now I suppose I can't do comedy. And you're like, you can absolutely do it. You need to. It's better to live a bit, like to then have something to talk about. And also just be kind to yourself with the whole. I think I've seen a lot of, when I was starting out, through a lot of, it's a bit like, you know, you are unique and like find your voice. And like you can't really find your voice. It's not like, oh, I'm looking for my voice. Oh, here's my voice. Like you have to kind of keep doing it wrong. Like I did it wrong for a long time, up until maybe 4 years ago. And like not wrong, but like technically I was not doing what I'm best at for a long time. And I think you just don't know until you've found it, and then you find a bit of peace and a bit of like, oh, this is coming slightly more naturally to me because of my experience that I've worked at in the past, and because all the times I've got it wrong and all the times so I think just like keep going. And as an online person, I do think that online's a great tool, and I don't think you have to do what everyone else is doing, but I also do think there's just like with the internet, there's so many different types of stuff you can do, you know, online, and just don't try and do the thing that's cool right now, because that's not going to be you, and then you're going to end up being like, well, I've gone viral, but I've gone viral for being this person and I don't know what to do next. You know, like it's always try and do the thing that you find funny, at least.
And I suppose also, Stevie, about, you know, you mentioned about being patient and it will happen. You were talking earlier about the fact that you had been writing sketch shows and thought, well, that's not going to happen, and then it did.
Yeah, exactly. And even when I was like, that isn't going to happen, I wasn't like, well, I'll become a tomato farmer. I was like, I just thought, okay, well, I'll keep putting my own sketches out online, and because I've enjoyed doing that, and while I'm doing that, I'll formulate what else. Maybe I could write a script. Maybe I could, like, I haven't done a lot of long form, for example. So that's going to be my next challenge. And I wrote a live show as well. So I was like, well, while I'm figuring out, but if I can't do sketch, maybe I'll do just me. Maybe it'll just be me doing live shows. And live isn't my natural medium, but I really enjoy it now. And I've like added that as a string to my bow that I didn't think I would have done, you know, a while back. So it's always good just to keep trying and to keep plugging away and talk to other comedians and trying, because they're the best when you're feeling down. Like Nish Kumar, who's an amazing stand-up, was talking to me about my tour yesterday, and he was just like, which venues do you love? Which venues do you want to kick into the sun? Which venues do you like? And I was like, oh, you can't have those. You could be like, smash it every time. He's like, no. So it's really nice. It's really nice to go, oh yeah, I'm not alone. And you're not alone.
Yeah. It feels like we've almost come full circle, haven't we, Gareth? Because we started off talking about nurturing and fostering relationships, and to Krystal's point, you had already said previously, Gareth had started off wanting to go into TV and do heavy documentaries and so on, and then sort of thought, no, I like making people laugh. I like laughing, and that was very similar to Krystal's point just now. So we've come full circle, Gareth, haven't we? But any other final tips that you would like to give people watching?
No, I think I mean it's both tricky and excellent that Krystal and Stevie have said the two things I was preparing, but so really I think I'll just come back round to saying the key thing is to get in touch with your own sense of humor, and if you're enjoying something and something's making you laugh, that's really the only measure. And you know, as Krystal says, hopefully there'll be some other people out there who also find that funny, and you need to keep going down your own creative road and celebrate that, as Stevie says, and that will mean it's fun even when it's awful.
Love that. Perfect sentiment. Thank you so much, Krystal and Stevie and Gareth, for making this RTS Futures session for our up and coming, hopefully, comedy producers of the future. Hopefully that's been really useful for you all. If you haven't yet seen Mitchell and Webb Are Not Helping, why not? But it is still streaming on Channel 4 if you would like to go and take a look and watch some exploding suitcases and some writers' rooms and some ABBA sketches and some sweary Aussie dramas and all sorts of other brilliant sketches. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.